Relationships are built on trust and respect, but sometimes we fail to look beyond the surface of what's said, unaware of the hidden layers that lie beneath. Stella entered my life like a burst of light, captivating me from the moment we crossed paths. After my previous relationship crumbled, I had convinced myself I was done with love. My heart felt too broken to ever heal. But then she came along, a breath of fresh air, a beautiful exception to everything I'd come to expect. We began spending more time together, and I quickly grew fond of her company. It was impossible not to fall under her spell, swept away by the joy and affection she brought into my life. When she finally reciprocated my feelings, it felt like all the old wounds from my past simply vanished. Suddenly, everything around me seemed brighter, as though life itself had been painted in vivid, dazzling hues. It wasn't long before we decided to take the next step and live together. But there was a catch. We both had separate apartments. After some back and forth, I agreed to move into her place. Our evenings together were filled with deep conversations, spontaneous outings, and catching up with friends. But there was one odd thing that stood out. Twice a month, she would spend an entire evening at her landlord's. It struck me as a bit odd, but I brushed it off. Everyone's a little quirky, I told myself. The apartment was in great condition, reasonably priced, and well located. Her explanations, though a bit out of the ordinary, seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. It's just one of those weird habits, I thought. After all, we all have our own little oddities. She had been in this business for 2 years before I came into her life, so why should I doubt it? My job was simple, just to pay my share of the rent. At least that's what I thought. I had no idea that there was much more hidden behind these mysterious nights than I could have imagined, and it would cost me more than I was prepared for. Living together felt easy and uneventful for the most part. We went about our days, tackling life's little challenges, while her bi-monthly visits to the landlord continued as if on autopilot. But one day, my curiosity finally got the better of me. "Stella," I asked, my voice betraying my growing suspicion, "why do you spend the whole evening there? I mean, handing over the rent should take no more than a few minutes, right?" Her reaction was immediate. She froze, clearly uncomfortable with my question. "Come on," I persisted gently. "What's really going on during those nights?" She let out a heavy sigh, her frustration becoming all too evident. "Have you forgotten? He's just this cranky old man. He's so picky, it's honestly ridiculous. First, he inspects every single bill under the light, rubs it between his fingers like he's testing its texture, even sniffs it. Then, he counts the money over and over. And after all that, he goes on and on about the neighbors. I just smile and nod through it all. What's the big deal?" Stella shrugged, her voice carrying a hint of impatience. "He's just a lonely old man with no one to talk to." "But wait," I said, pressing her on a point. "Didn't you mention that his kids are taking his pension straight off his card? How's he lonely if he has family?" She faltered, momentarily losing her composure. "Well, you know," she began, struggling to find the right words. "I've never actually seen anyone at his place. Maybe they don't visit him." Her explanation only made things murkier. In my mind, this quirky landlord grew even stranger, a reclusive eccentric, obsessed with inspecting cash, like he was searching for fakes, and yet somehow estranged from his family. The more I thought about it, the more the whole situation seemed to belong in an offbeat indie movie, a bizarre disconnected mess, where nothing quite added up. Is the cheap rent really worth all this? I asked, my voice laced with frustration. Why not just rent from someone normal? "I don't know," Stella replied with a nonchalant shrug. "I guess I've just gotten used to this place. Besides, if I ever move out, it'll be to a home my own, not another rental." "You've got a point," I laughed. "But let's be real. We're a long way off from that. What we've saved so far might barely cover the cost of a balcony." We shared a laugh, and for a while, I managed to shove the strange situation to the back of my mind. Life went on, and the landlord's oddities became just another quirk I didn't think much about. That is, until everything I thought I knew about Stella and us was completely appended. It started innocently. A series of messages from someone named Lincoln popped up on her phone. At first, it was just a passing glance, but the frequency of the messages began to nag at me. Slowly, doubts began to creep in, like dark clouds on a sunny day. Could it be? Was Stella involved with her landlord? The thought gnawed at me, chipping away at the trust I thought we had. By the time the next rent payment evening rolled around, I could no longer push the unsettling questions to the side. I had to know the truth. That night, I decided to follow her. I kept my distance, watching as Stella left our apartment. To my surprise, she didn't head toward the landlord's place. Instead, she walked toward a cafe in the city centre. Waiting for her there was a man, a far cry from the frail, eccentric landlord I had imagined. He was well dressed, much older than her, but not the picture of a doddering old man. My heart sank as I watched them chat over coffee, exchanging laughter, and looks that seemed far too intimate for mere acquaintances. Moments later, they got up and walked out together. Where were they heading? To the nearest hotel. At that moment, the last shred of doubt disappeared. The puzzle was solved, and the truth it revealed was more devastating than I could have imagined. I sat in my car, parked a few blocks away, and found a bench near the cafe entrance. The world around me moved in a blur as my mind raced. Hours later, they came out. The man flagged down a taxi, gently ushered Stella inside, and paid the driver before the car pulled away. It was time to face the truth. My determination hardened as I approached him. "Excuse me, are you Lincoln?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level and controlled. "I'm Stella's husband. We live together." "Ah, nice to meet you," he said, offering his hand with a casual confidence, like we were long-lost friends. His calmness only made the pit in my stomach grow deeper. I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. "We need to talk," I stated firmly. Without hesitation, he agreed. As we walked through the quiet, dimly lit streets, he began to unravel a story that was more twisted and painful than I could have ever prepared for. "I'm a wealthy man," he started, his voice cold and detached, as if reciting some business proposal. "Money means nothing to me. It's just a tool. But companionship? That's a different story. A beautiful, pleasant girl is hard to come by, especially at my age. I don't waste time with dates, dinners, or theatres trying to convince someone to share my bed." He paused, watching me for a reaction before continuing. "I could pay for services, sure, but that doesn't interest me anymore. I've grown tired of it all." Then Stella came along, and she agreed to this arrangement without a second thought. I stayed quiet, my silence urging him to go on. For over 2 years now, we've had this setup, and it works for both of us. She has a roof over her head, and I get to enjoy the company of a charming young woman on a regular basis. "Let me make one thing clear," he said, his voice sharp and deliberate. "I've never forced her. About 6 months ago, she suggested we switch to cash payments instead of the usual arrangement. I was fine with that. But when she came over, She changed her mind and ended up upstairs with me again. And now you know the whole truth. Do with it what you will. It's not my fault. Stella is an adult. She makes her own decisions." Each word he spoke felt like a blow to the chest, each sentence sinking deeper into the pit of my stomach. There was nothing left to say. The truth was laid out in front of me, and it was uglier than anything I had ever imagined. When I got home, I moved through the apartment like a stranger, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I packed my things methodically. Each item I folded and placed in a bag felt like another piece of the life we had built together slipping away. The silence between us was deafening. Stella stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with confusion and fear, her face asking questions I couldn't bear to answer. "You know," I said softly, my voice barely audible, "I ran into your old man, and you were right. He does look good for his age. Turns out, he even withdraws his pension all by himself." Her face collapsed, her eyes filling with tears. To my surprise, she didn't try to argue, didn't offer an explanation. She just stood there, motionless, before silently walking to the balcony and handing me my jacket with trembling hands. There were no lies, no excuses, just the raw, quiet truth. I think, in that moment, she realized how recklessly she had treated me, how her selfish choices had cut me deeper than she could possibly understand. But I had nothing left to say, no anger or bitterness left to give her. All I had was the quiet resolve to walk away. With my bags packed and my heart in tatters, I left without a second glance. If this was how she chose to pay for the apartment, then that was her choice. I wasn't going to stand in her way. She could continue her arrangement, just not with me.